So on this part, we're going to find the slopes of horizontal and vertical lines. Notice it says the slope of any vertical line is undefined. The slope of any horizontal line is 0. We've actually talked about this just in this lesson even. So when we're looking at this, first of all, it's about recognizing. Remember that on the last lesson I taught you y equals a number is a horizontal line. So now I know this is horizontal. Right, it's a horizontal line, and a horizontal line has a slope, not a y, a slope of 0. So let's write that with an M. Okay, and I just know that because I'm going to learn what kind of slope a vertical line has and the kind of slope that a horizontal line has, and we want you to know this. Okay, on the next one, if we solve for x, we would add 4 to both sides. So x is 4. And then knowing that x equals 4 is a vertical line, that's what I know about this. It is a vertical line. And a vertical line has an undefined slope, right? So I'm going to say undefined slope. All right, so we don't have a numerical answer for this one. We just simply say undefined. And you do have to know the terminology for this. All right. All right, so there was a blank screen. I had to pause for a second to do my little workaround. Okay, so this is comparing the slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines. So once again, there's some things that you just have to learn. And what you're going to learn is about the slopes of parallel lines. So if I have non-vertical lines that are parallel, they have the same slope. If they were vertical lines and they're parallel, they both have undefined slopes, right? But I guess because the fact that they're vertical. Notice if they're parallel, they're going in the same direction and they're evenly spaced apart. And so they have the same slope and different y-intercepts. Now that means the slope has to match exactly, right? The slopes are exactly the same. I'm saying this because in the past I've had students who will say things like, the slopes are the same except one's negative and one's positive. Well, if they don't have the same sign, then they're not the same. So the slopes are exactly the same. Now the reason they have to have a different y-intercept is because if they had the same y-intercept and the same slope, it would be the same line. So that's a part that you can look at. We usually concentrate on the slopes, and I do want you comparing slopes when you're talking about parallel and perpendicular lines. Okay, so two non-vertical lines that are perpendicular are perpendicular if the product of their slopes is -1. So that's one way to look at it. If I multiplied the slopes of perpendicular lines, then they would equal -1 when I multiplied. So for instances, let's say that the slope of my lines were 7/8, right? That would be 1. And then the slope of my other line was -8/7. Now if I multiply those, I get -56/56, which is -1, right? So that's one way to look at it. Another way is that the slopes of perpendicular lines are opposite, meaning opposite signs, opposite reciprocals. Now remember, a reciprocal is where you take like 7/8 and flip it right upside down to be 8/7. And opposite means that they have opposite signs, so they're not the same sign. If you think about this in a logical way, if they're going to go in two separate directions like this and meet to form perpendicular lines, then they have to have slopes that are different signs. Okay, our opposite, remember that's the signs, reciprocals. Okay, so on these we're going to decide if they are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Okay, and we're going to do that by the slopes. These are in slope-intercept form, so simply identify the slope of each line. Right, this line has a slope of 5 and a y-intercept at positive 8. This one has a slope of positive 5, but the y-intercept at negative 8. So this means the slopes are exactly the same, and they are parallel. Right? And let me just say because a lot of times I will ask you this question, why? Why are they parallel, perpendicular, or neither? And you have to explain because the slopes are the same. Now I will usually take this as the explanation, but you could say the slopes are the same and the y-intercepts are different. But if you just said the part about the slopes, I would be okay with that. Okay. Let's look at the next one. So on this one, once again, we're identifying the slope of each line. And so the first one has a slope of 2. And the second one has a slope of 1/2. Now, it turns out that if I multiply these two, I would get a positive 1. And remember, we need a negative 1 for it to be perpendicular. And they are reciprocals, right? There's reciprocals, but not with opposite signs. And so in this case, these are neither. There's lots of pairs of lines that are going to be neither. They're not parallel, they're not perpendicular, because maybe they intersect and they look something like this, right? Well, you can tell that that's not going to be perpendicular, and it's definitely not parallel. And so when I'm explaining neither, then you have to talk about the parallel and the perpendicular. So I'm going to say because they are, let's say, the slopes. So you know I'm talking about the slopes. The slopes are not the same. Or opposite reciprocals. They are reciprocals, but not opposite signs. Okay, neither, because the slopes are not the same, or opposite reciprocals, and that's what I would be looking for parallel or perpendicular. Next, okay, so notice on these two, I don't have them solved for y, therefore I can't just look at them and tell what the slope is. So first, we will solve for y. So we're going to put these in slope-intercept form so we can identify the slope easily. So subtract the 2x, we're going to divide by -1. So y equals 2x plus 10. So on this one we have a slope of positive 2. Okay. On the second one, we're also solving for y. We're going to subtract the 2x. So we have 4y equals -2x plus 2. And then we divide each term by 4. So my equation is y equals -1/2 x plus 1/2. That gives me a slope of -1/2. -1/2 is the reciprocal, the opposite reciprocal of 2, right? So think about 2 is 2 over 1. The reciprocal would be 1 over 2. The opposite reciprocal would be a -1/2. Also, if I take 2 times -1/2, I get -1. So you can see that it meets the criteria whichever way you're looking at it. And so we're going to say perpendicular for this one. Because you can explain this either way, because the slopes are opposite reciprocals. This is the way I explain it most often, but it's okay if you talk about the product being -1. Reciprocals. I like to explain it because I want you to be thinking of it this way. Okay, it says use the points shown on the graph to determine the slope of the line. Now we can name these points and use the formula. So we could use 0, 3 and 1, 0 because that's the 2 points that are marked, right? We can also use the counting method, and the counting method is just finding the rise. So from here it's 1, 2, 3. Notice this is falling or a decreasing line, so that would be a -3. And then 1 to the right, that would be my run. So this slope is -3 if I just count it on the graph. I can verify this by using the formula. So if I take 0 minus 3 over 1 minus 0, I get -3 over 1, which is -3. Right? It doesn't matter to me which way you do this. Counting on the graph is kind of handy, and so if you just want to count it on the graph, that is perfectly fine. And then let's look at these 2 points. Now, these are the 2 points that are marked, but we can really use other points if we can tell for sure, right? Notice it goes through here and here. There's lots of points we can mark on this line. If we count it all the way from the 1 at the beginning, right, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My rise is 5. Notice this is an increasing slope, so it's going to be positive. And then if I count from here, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 over 5 is 1, so my slope is 1. And then I can really choose any of the points on the graph and verify it with the formula. So if I use the points that were marked originally, then I'm at -3, -1, and 2, 4. So I would have a slope of 4 minus -1, so +1. 2 minus -3, so 2 plus 3. That is 5 over 5, just like it was when I was counting. So my slope is 1. So I verified it by using the formula. All right, so that's it for this lesson.